This September, it will be 10 years since I started at Cambridge and what was supposed to be the best 3 years of my life. I'd wanted to go ever since I visited as a 6-year-old, and I remember telling my dad that if I managed to get in, I'd be happy for every day of my life. It turned out to be a 3-year-long panic attack instead. I spent the entire degree holding my breath, waiting to be found out and kicked out. For most of the time, I was hiding in my room, overworking to prove to my supervisors that I belonged, and to shield myself from the other students who would make me feel like I didn't. I imagine you had all sorts of ideas about what Oxford would be like before you applied. It's such a familiar name to the popular imagination that it's easy for people to make assumptions about what it's like to study here, and there are implications for who people think you are too. I wonder how your experience actually compares to what you'd imagined before you arrived, and I wonder how comfortably you carry the baggage of the Oxford label. From personal experience, I know how lonely it can be to feel like an imposter, to feel like you can't appreciate your own achievement or can't fully be present in a place because it doesn't feel like it's truly yours. A gift that feels too good to be true can end up feeling like a curse if you have the mindset that sooner or later you're going to be hit with the bill. Like signing up for a free trial, which you forget to cancel before the annual subscription kicks in. That feeling of being caught and exposed can hang like a dagger over your head. One way of dealing with that imposter syndrome is to seek safety through striving, working constantly for something, either to have it in the first place or to feel worthy of what you've already achieved. Trying to earn something offers the illusion of power over one's fate. If I'm working towards something, I can crank up the gears if I need to. I can follow the instructions more closely. I can pull an all-nighter. If it's within my control, there can't be any surprises. Or so I tell myself. In reality, the feeling of being in the driving seat is an illusion. Since we have no influence over a whole range of external factors, cf. COVID-19, we cannot really insulate ourselves from being surprised and disappointed. And even chasing after the mirage can lead to feelings of inferiority and worthlessness that are all the more painful because they're not coming from outside, they're in our own voice. Let me explain. When I was trying to make myself feel like I belonged at university by obsessively working, no grade could settle my anxiety. I was only ever as good as my last performance. So it didn't matter that I did well in one exam. I'd brush it off, tell myself it was a fluke, shift the goalpost, and put all the significance on what happened in the next round. And when I was suffering with anorexia, it didn't matter that one day I'd cut X calories off my daily recommended allowance. Psst, that was yesterday. Now I had to get by on even fewer. In other words, it was always the voice inside my own head who was telling me I wasn't good enough, that I had to keep trying, keep proving myself. I was the one raising the incline on the treadmill. I was scared of what others would think of me, but it was my own thoughts which were tearing me apart. The mindset of needing to work for things in order to be sure of them can also affect our faith. The doubt often crosses my mind that maybe the idea of grace, of absolute forgiveness, is just clever PR, and I'll later be asked to produce a record sheet of everything I've done, good, bad, and embarrassing, and judged accordingly. When I read some of the promises in the Bible, passages which say I'm a co-heir with Christ who will one day reign with him, that the Spirit of God lives in me, that I have every spiritual blessing, it's hard to accept. It doesn't feel true, and knowing how double-minded I am, it doesn't feel right either. I can't even manage my own finances. I don't really want to be a co-heir with Christ. So to feel like I really belong in the church, I've tended to find comfort in the extremes, just like I did with food and at college. More time doing, reading, talking about, listening to, liking, following, consuming, and regurgitating anything labelled Christian is bound to put me in God's good books, right? In our reading for today, we hear Jesus say that if we keep his commands, then we'll remain in God's love. And at first glance, I'm like, fantastic. A nice cause and effect. Follow the commands, get love and approval. And I'm all ears for the do's and don'ts that I imagine he'll spell out next. But the command is to love. To remain in God's love, Jesus says, love. Become a channel of God's love, and you'll always be abiding in it. That immediately writes out the possibility of hustling for our salvation. Because control, fear, and performance, they all shut out love. You can't receive or give love while you're playing a part, because you can't be sure of what would happen if you drop the act. And you can't receive love when you're walking on eggshells, or second guessing when the rejection that you're so sure you deserve will finally come. Because there has to at least be trust for there to be love. So, the only way into that divine love triangle of giving what we receive and receiving what we give is to surrender control, to get off the treadmill, to abandon the attempt to make it on our own. The invitation is to be caught up in something not of your own making, something that stretches far before and beyond the timelines of our own lives. And that, I think, is the essence of the invitation of faith. It isn't about following rules or believing all the right doctrines or anything else where I and what I do is at the centre of the sentence. It's about letting go. There are lots of reasons why it's hard to be a Christian, why it's a narrow path. And lots of people think it's the prohibitions they associate with Christianity. No sex, no drugs, no rock and roll, all that jazz. Even if that was integral to following Jesus, I don't think that would be the challenge. And knowing that I'm speaking to a bunch of overachievers, I have a feeling that willpower is not something you regularly struggle with. What I think humans, especially those on a track to academic and professional success, really struggle with is resting, learning to abide, accepting enough instead of grasping for more. But life will teach you to let go. COVID-19, I'm afraid, is the rule, not the exception in this regard. We will all have to abandon some of our expectations about the world, about ourselves, and even about God. So, when Jesus invites us to find our lives by losing it, he's not asking us to embrace asceticism just to prove a point or for us to prove how much we love him. He's inviting us to see reality for what it really is, to stop wishing it and ourselves conform to our imagined ideal, and to trust that reality, as we find it, is where God is at work, and on a scale which is wider than our fists could ever grasp, or our minds could ever fathom. Amen.